In this video, I'll be talking about jazz playing outside. Hey, it's Paul Toby from jazzmental.com. Thanks for joining me. My concept of playing outside is essentially slipping out of the key of the moment into another key. So for example, let's say we're in D minor or D Dorian and you want to slip outside, might sound something like this. And so essentially what you're doing is you're jumping into another key briefly and then coming back. And we're going to talk about my concept on how to approach that in this video. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing to think about when playing outside is you have to know what the key of the moment is. So today we're just really talking very simply about like D Dorian. So in any song like So What. So it's going from D minor to E flat, but there's like this D minor for a long period of time. So that's the key of the moment, which is essentially C because it's 2-5-1 in C. So all white notes. So the first thing I think about is, well, what is the scale for D Dorian? Or you can play, obviously, the bebop scale. And then a lot of people think about like sidestepping into like E flat momentarily. I don't actually like to think of it like that. I like to think of it like, what is the tritone substitution of the key of the moment for the dominant seventh chord? So in this case, if the dominant seventh chord is G7, that tritone is F and B. And what is the tritone substitution for that? It's D flat. And so that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, what is the tritone substitution of the dominant chord? So I'm going from D minor, slipping into D flat 7, and then back to D minor. So the two scales mixing together. But you really want to figure out what patterns to play over that. So again, you can sit there and work out all kinds of patterns all day long. Like you can say, okay, if you've got triad, like a D flat 7 chord, and then a half step above, which is the F sharp. Which is kind of cool. And a lot of times it's not a perfect science because your brain and your fingers together never seem to mesh perfectly. It's really about where the fingers fall and all about these melodies that you're making while you're going along. But the initial concept is slip into the key that's completely the opposite of what you're in now. And keeping that tritone substitution in your head is a good way to think about it. So from D minor to D flat 7. So yeah, I mean, it's probably a good idea to figure out some patterns like the one I just mentioned. But if you just play that, it just sounds boring. So what you have to do is you have to mix it up. Things like that. So the left hand is essentially following the right hand around. You're not always hitting the chords exactly the same as the scale that you're playing. So you can see you're just trying to work out little melodies, little patterns, and keeping it consistent and sounding like a solo. And that's really the trick. So what I would suggest is that over a long period of time, you just pick a key and try to work out patterns in that key. Okay, so again, I'm practicing. I'm not making specific music. As soon as you start to put bass and drums with it, things get really interesting because they start following you around as well, which kind of is the whole point of jazz. It's like this conversation going on. By contrast, I mean, in your soloing, you want to find things that are different, that stand out. So what you might want to do is think about speeding things up or slowing them down for contrast. So for example, if I just start out in eighth notes, and then, slip into something trickier, which is like 5 notes per beat or 6 notes per beat, just making it faster so that there's contrast. So just a little bit about the left hand. Like I said earlier, it follows the right hand around. If the right hand's going up, the left hand is going up. It's a little easier to do that than try to come in together and then go out together. And it also sounds better when the left hand is following the right hand around. What I'm doing with the left hand is essentially just plunking down the fifth in the bass and then playing fourths. And then sidestepping into other. And not always playing just the straight fourths, you're also putting tritones in there as well, like. So that's a C7 sharp 9. Really, McCoy Tyner, I think, was a major influence in that particular style. When you're playing this scale, if you slip into the tritone substitution, which is D flat 7, you can absolutely play the D flat 7 scale. So going up in the key and down outside and then back in. So that's one way to think about it as well. Okay, so try to practice that. I know it's probably a little bit esoteric to sort of think about it in these terms, but it's really just improvising, finding things that sound good, go out, come back in. Play outside. It's fun. It's not an exact science. Again, it's not like I can say, hey, go play this pattern 1,000,000 times and then stick that in your next solo. That's kind of not the way that I think about it. So I hope this was helpful to you. And Ayustria, thank you for the question. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Get out there, get practicing, and we'll see you over at jazzmental.com when you get a few minutes. Thanks for your time. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We're making 5 videos a week, just like this one, on various aspects of music and the music business. So I'd really appreciate it if you could come back and join me another time. Take care.